As we celebrate the 250th birthday of the United States of America, many of us here in the United States will be viewing fireworks shows or maybe even launching some of our own fireworks, which stems from the 18th century when John Adams said America's birthday, quote, ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other. Bells, bonfires, and illuminations sounds a lot like fireworks to me. And as newly minted Americans in July of 1776, the faithful founders were bringing with them traditions like illuminations in the sky from grand old England. And making that connection made me wonder, would Shakespeare have had fireworks? And I wanted to explore whether the bard would have had or used colorful explosives in the sky to celebrate events in his lifetime. Here's what I found out. Of course, when you go back to looking into the original, very first fireworks in the history of the world, it seems that the Chinese actually did it first. Around the 13th century, the Chinese invented gunpowder-propelled rockets and gave the world the first aerial fireworks. Now, if you're looking into the history of fireworks, you will note that the strict definition of fireworks goes back well before the 13th century, but we were looking strictly at the ones that are gunpowder propelled into the sky and make large explosions. That one seems to have originated around the 13th century. This next major leap in fireworks technology actually occurred during the Renaissance, which is when artisans started trying to add color to these explosions. They began experimenting with what you could add to the gunpowder to make the fiery burst show up in a colorful form. By the 16th century, many components of today's aerial fireworks were already in place. So there's not much change in exactly how the firework functions. They had a lift system, such as mortars and rockets, that propel the firework into the sky, and then fuses and bursting charges, which is the center explosive inside of a fireworks shell, and additives that change the light and color. You might be tempted to think that colorful fireworks weren't possible for the 16th century, and that perspective is emboldened by research that shows you that it wasn't until the 19th century that vibrant colors were used in fireworks. However, before the 19th century, there were actually colored fireworks. They just, if you were to strictly compare them from, a 16th century version to a 19th or 20th century version, those more modern ones are going to look more vibrant. But for someone like Shakespeare and his contemporaries, they wouldn't have had that comparison. So the colorful fireworks of his lifetime would have been just as exciting as we think of fireworks today. Simon Werrett, who has been on our show to talk about fireworks, and I'll link you to that podcast inside this episode and definitely down in the show notes if you don't see it on the screen right now, writes in his article on the subject that as far back as the 13th century, quote, gunpowder containing verdigris and sal, ammoniac should tint flames green, while camphor, indigo, and incense would add white, blue, and yellow respectively. Simon brings this research into Shakespeare's day when he cites The Secret of Gunmen, which is a 17th century copy of a late 16th century English manuscript that gives instructions for how to add colors to fireworks. And it says, quote, to make fire of diverse colors, use Spanish green, camphor, sulfur, turpentine, oil of linseed, oil benedict, oleum benedictum, oil of bricks. These give in the night many colors and fearful to see. Simon's overview of colors in fireworks includes red, purple, yellow, blue, green, black, and white, along with orange. Fireworks may have started in the military, which is where they first began as like a weapon, but they became popular for special occasions of all stripes by Shakespeare's lifetime. Simon explains that, quote, through the 16th and 17th centuries, courts and cities across Europe celebrated peace treaties, triumphs, royal occasions, and the new year with elaborate displays of fireworks over city squares, rivers, castles, and gardens. They were set off by artificers, that's Simon's word there, artisans or gunners who made pyrotechnics and ordnance for the state's artillery and watched by the courts and great crowds of onlookers. They were called artificial fireworks, and Simon goes on to say that they were similar to those of today, with rockets, candles, wheels, and but many were prized for their exotic motions, zigzagging through the air, or even in and out of water, or as imitations of celestial and fiery meteors mimicking suns, stars, thunder, and lightning. So, just when you think Thunder on the Mountain is the name of your local fireworks show, it turns out that William Shakespeare's lifetime would have had thunderous fireworks displays for his lifetime as well. The idea of fireworks seems to have developed from the idea of rockets, which were used in the military, and they were continued to be used in the military for the 16th century, but by the 16th century, rockets had largely fallen out of use in favor of other weapons. But that didn't stop rocket technology from being used for entertainment in Shakespeare's lifetime. As an interesting side note when it comes to rockets, and we need to explore this further on the podcast at some point, so I'm adding it to our future list. But I found out that the technology for outer space rockets, that multi-stage rocket propulsion system that we use today, this actually existed in the context of fireworks for Shakespeare's lifetime. A man named Johann Schmidlapp, I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly, was a German fireworks maker, and he invented what's called the step rocket. This was a multi-staged vehicle for lifting fireworks to higher altitudes. Schmidlapp's book first appeared in 1561 and was reprinted in 1590 and then again in 1591. The image here on the screen is presumed to have been taken from the 1591 publication and represents what appeared in his original 1561 design. A large first stage rocket carried a smaller second stage rocket, and when the large rocket burned out, the smaller rocket continued to a higher altitude before showering the sky with glowing cinders. Schmidlapp's idea is basic to all rockets that go into outer space today. So it seems that the idea of celebrating a major occasion, like, I don't know, the birth of a nation, was indeed a tradition brought to the US by the English founders, who back in England for centuries before the birth of America had celebrated their major holidays the same way as Shakespeare, with pomp, circumstance, and you guessed it, with fireworks. So as you enjoy fireworks this weekend, you can add a little history to your celebrations, knowing Shakespeare had fireworks too. That's it for this week. Thank you for watching. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. If you like walking around in turn of the 17th century England to see the sights, smell the smells, play the games, and maybe even haunt an old theater or two, then this is the place for you. Hit that notification bell so you can be sure to join us on our next adventure. I'll see you in the next episode.